He once stood at the peak of magic, Oscar Sage, master of the White Tower, savior of mankind. But even legends must die. 20 years later, he awakens in the body of a weak apprentice who can barely cast a spark. The tower he ruled now crumbles, mocked as the weakest among the four. Yet behind those powerless hands burns the will of the man who once reached the stars. He saved the world once, now he'll save its magic. What happens when the weakest mage carries the mind of a god? Let's find out. Somewhere in the starry sky, amid blood-soaked ruins, surrounded by his fallen fellow mages, sat Oscar Sage. But he, too, was at the end of his strength thanks to the sword piercing his body. He used magic and contacted the others, asking them to answer him if any of them had survived. If they couldn't speak, then let them move or make a sound. His words became a plea. A wave passed through the sea of blood, but no one responded. No one? Was he really the only survivor? He glanced at the head of his enemy, the one who had plunged the blade into him. The one who had first united the demons and led humanity to destruction was the High Priest. The demons were merciless. They created chaos and were not at all averse to murder. But when the mages arrived, Oscar, the head of the Mage Tower, immediately began restoring order on the battlefield. In the war against the demons that came from their realm, he and his followers, the mages of the White Tower, put everything on the line for the future of humanity. They fought bravely, slaying the enemy leader, but fell in battle themselves. Edna Sol Laplace, the last dragon in the world and a caretaker recording history, arrived. She recorded that today, April 28th at 3 hours and 12 minutes, the death of the High Priest was confirmed. He looked up at her, and she said she had good news and bad news. He asked her to start with the bad news, and she informed him that, as expected, an army of demons had invaded the White Tower. As a result, most of the mages perished, and the tower itself was partially destroyed. Those mages and research resources were almost burned. The good news: the Empire's forces arrived earlier than expected, so they managed to rescue some survivors, including his students. He said he was glad to hear it and then coughed, covering his mouth with his hand. And she asked if he regretted his choice today. He told her that he didn't. He chose each of them and brought them personally. Even in front of them, he wouldn't say he regretted it. She asked if he had anything to add, and he looked thoughtfully at his bloody palm. He asked her to keep an eye on his students sometimes. They were still young, so he was sure they would be very worried. She bowed to him as a sign of respect and promised him this, and her gesture made him laugh and ask, "Does a dragon bow its head to a pathetic human?" She said that he had the right to such an attitude. Neither the continent nor she would forget the sacrifices made by the heroes of the White Tower. He smiled and closed his eyes, saying that so be it. In fact, he lied that he had no regrets. He may be the best mage, but he's a lousy leader. If he were given another chance, he'd live solely for his people, even if it meant being called a villain. He looked up at the sky one last time, thinking that this was how he wanted to live, and then his hand fell lifelessly. Edna closed his eyelids. On April 28th at 3:47 minutes, the death of Oscar Sage, the head of the White Magic Tower, was confirmed. As a result of the battle with demons, 132 6th-level mages of the White Tower, 19 7th-level mages, 2 8th-level mages, and the 9th-level mage, Oscar Sage, died. These historical records passed through the decades, and now the White Magic Tower still existed. A young man was sleeping in one of the rooms. A leaf fell on his palm, and he immediately woke up and jumped up, hitting the boy who came to visit him. He was startled by the unexpectedness, and the water spilled out of the bowl in his hands, after which he exclaimed in displeasure that he was completely soaked. He just wanted to change his towel. In his sleep, he behaves creepily and doesn't even show gratitude for his care. The guy was very surprised and wondered if he was sleeping, and in a defenseless state, he put his hand to his chest, and feeling his heartbeat, thought that he should have died. MC woke up in this guy's body, but he didn't understand it yet. And feeling this rhythmic beat, he was amazed. He clearly remembers how the High Priest pierced him with a sword. He wanted to ask what exactly happened, but Maxim burst into the room, knocking the door off its hinges, and he was furious when he learned that he woke up. Frank immediately rushed to calm him down and said that less than 5 minutes had passed since he opened his eyes. Maxim ordered him to step aside. He had already let him get away with it a couple of times, but now he would definitely make a man out of this idiot. Frank objected, because he was still sick, and MC, meanwhile, was perplexed. He asked them how he survived, and they looked at him in surprise. This only made Maxim even more angry, and he asked if he was also surprised that he was alive. MC noted that judging by his cape, he was a mage of the White Tower. Let him explain to him what was going on, and why was he addressing him so disrespectfully. Frank became very nervous, and his words only infuriated Maxim. He shouted, did he really need to explain everything to him? He really didn't understand anything. Let him show respect and beg for mercy. He swung his arm to hit him, and he thought, was he an assassin sent by demons? He used the wind shield and thought that if it instantly blocked his hand, it would hit his wrist, which would bend like a straw. He's a low-level weakling who doesn't think before acting, but when his hand touched the shield, it disappeared, which he didn't expect. He was surprised that his magic was so bad and looked at his hands in confusion. Maxim, meanwhile, calmed down after seeing his magic and praised him, saying that apparently he hadn't just been lazy until now. He left the room, and parting words said that he would postpone the punishment for embezzling the research fund for now. Let him focus on recovery. Frank said goodbye to him, then turned to MC and asked, was he completely crazy? He was in shock. How long had he slept? If the windshield disappeared as soon as he set it up? Frank walked to the other side of the room and said that he knew what kind of character Maxim had, but he had gone a bit too far. He wasn't listening at all, clenching his fists and thinking that the mana circles, quantity, and purity were at their lowest levels. Was this really his body? What happened to him? He excitedly asked what day it was, and Frank, startled by his sudden question, told him that it was September 21st and that he had been unconscious. MC asked, so he had slept for 5 months? The guy closed the window and told him that it had been a day at most, and Frank, realizing that he wouldn't get a proper answer from him, asked him to call Lloyd, and if he wasn't there, then Juliet or Shasha. Let them tell him what happened. Frank was surprised and thought, is he pretending? Has he really lost his memory? He told him to forget about the traitors. And why does he call the head of the tower so informally? MC didn't understand which traitors he was talking about and asked, he forgot about that too? Was this a side effect? Lloyd Schultz renounced the White Tower and became a disciple of the Red Tower, and Juliet Dominic stole a high-class magic book and fled. MC was indignant and asked in a displeased tone, how dare he utter such nonsense? Frank stared at him in shock and thought in surprise. Not a muscle on his face moved, so he wasn't lying? He asked. So Shasha is the head of the magic tower? The guy added that she was incredible, and he wondered how a 5-year-old could become head. Frank tiredly ruffled his hair and asked, he's also lost 20 years? MC sighed heavily and thought that he had a wild imagination, but he wouldn't be angry with the young man, even though he presented this fiction very convincingly. Frank moved away from the window, and when he saw his reflection, he shuddered. It wasn't him. At first, he thought it was someone else and touched his face, and when the reflection repeated itself, he mentally exclaimed, who is this? Time passed, he got used to it a little, and now he looked at the city streets and couldn't believe it, even though he saw everything with his own eyes. It turns out that 20 years have passed since his death. Everything has changed a lot. Are these glowing things called lanterns? And cars drive here, all thanks to the magical engineering revolution. He smiled and thought that they would like that. When the world collapsed, only those who renounced everything remained. He decided to stop indulging in memories, and having made the window mirrored, began to summarize everything he learned about the owner of this body. Oscar Crushen was accepted into the White Tower at the age of 10. Now he is 20. He's a first-level mage from a noble fallen house, but he is simply a terrible mage. Having only reached level 1 at 20, he apparently decided to speed things up by embezzling research funds to buy an illegal elixir. He lost consciousness after taking it. If he had succeeded, his mana would have increased several times over, but if he had failed, he was risking his life, which is why the potion was illegal. Frank said he was unconscious for a whole day, but to be honest, the other guy ultimately died from the mana surge. He suddenly felt a flash in his chest. It was mana, but it was too much for a level 1, which surprised him. Most mana is pure and hasn't yet been refined, meaning the elixir did have an effect. He noticed a black liquid appear in the mana's core. It flowed through the vessel in his hand to the tip of his finger and came out. The accumulated black drop fell to the floor and burned through it, and MC realized it was poison. He looked at his hand and began to wonder why there was poison in this body, and then smirked. He began to guess what was going on. Firstly, this elixir wasn't a fake, it was real, and such a thing is usually unobtainable, even at a high price. The problem is that Oscar Crushen didn't know it contained poison. Considering how much poison remained and the time he lost consciousness, it's clear the cause of death wasn't the mana surge, but poisoning. The poison class is too high to waste it on a first-level mage. If someone other than him had seen it, they would have had a hard time finding any traces. He clenched his fist and stared thoughtfully into space, then rose from his chair and thought that he didn't know who had decided to play with his soul. But in the end, he was given the second chance he had been thinking about before his death. He took the empty elixir bottle and thought that this selfish life, for the sake of his people, was a pretty good start. He glanced at the reflection on the bottle with a smile, and told Oscar that he would avenge him as a token of gratitude for his body. Time passed. Somewhere on the outskirts of Siren, a guy came to his boss and said, "Hey, there's news from the shop." The man ordered him to call him boss. How many times did he have to repeat this? The guy nervously apologized to him and got down to business. The shop was completely destroyed inside. Some magician had done it. His boss, enraged, put the bottle of alcohol on the table and exclaimed, "Who dared do this?" He answered that he wasn't sure. The magician asked who sold him that elixir. Could it really be Oscar Crushen? The man said it was impossible. Oscar was a mage only in theory. Besides, how could someone on the verge of death defeat their guys? His subordinate became worried, wondering if the White Tower had decided to investigate this matter. The boss asked if he had forgotten who exactly had asked them to deal with Oscar. He was wearing a White Tower ring, meaning a local mage wanted him dead. Someone entered their room and said that wasn't a fact. What kind of idiot would you have to be not to hide your origin? They both immediately turned around in fear, hearing an unfamiliar voice. It turned out to be Oscar. He had snuck up to them through the balcony, drawn there by the faint scent emanating from the vial. After examining the building, he realized that more people were involved in this matter than he had thought. The man stared at him in shock and asked if he really had smashed the shop. He went into the room and confirmed it, after which he asked them to continue their conversation. He was very interested. The man chuckled and said he planned to let him go if he pretended he hadn't heard anything. He ordered his subordinate to